Welcome in to the Storycraft Cafe slash Dabble Premium User Wordsmith Workshops. Today, we are super excited to have Michael Ronn back with us for yet another exciting presentation. This time, we've had Michael on a couple of times, and we've picked his brain about, any topic that I could think of. And we got to talking with Michael after our last event that we did. And I said, we would love to have you come back and just teach us, just to put on your teacher hat. And if you have a workshop that you have kind of workshopped and want to present it to our audience, we would love to have you. And Michael sent me a couple of options, and I went over it with the rest of our marketing team, and we said that we really liked the topic that you sent, and the topic was leveling up your mindset. And we just thought that was so out of the box. And we talked so much about particulars of writing craft, that this seemed like a fun topic. That how do you get inside, getting your head right to do this sort of thing. So anyway, I babbled on long enough. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, X, and Instagram. So wherever you like to follow us, you can pop over to any of the Dabble accounts on those platforms. Michael, welcome back. The stage is all yours.
All right, Hank. Well, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to chat with you. And folks, you want to give me a second here? I will get my screen all shared. This is the hardest part of the presentation. So, Hank, can you give me some confirmation? Can you see everything? Okay.
You're great. I see the slides at the bottom, but they're not on the presentation screen yet. I can see them in the preview.
Okay. Can you add that to the stage then?
Okay. How's
there
that?
we go. Perfect.
All right.
That is perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. So, okay. Well, hello, dabblers. Thank you for having me. Thank you for spending some time with me this next hour or so. And we're going to be talking about leveling up your author mindset. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I think mindset is important, but I think we sometimes get a little too woo-woo about mindset. We focus on what all the billionaires and the super successful people in the world are doing, and we forget about the survivor bias, right? And I'm not here to sell you you got to do this and you got to hustle and you got to grind. That's not my thing. Instead, I like to give advice that I've lived and that I know has been helpful for people on my YouTube channel, people in my community, and things that I think will help you from a day-to-day perspective, and just ways to shift your mindset just a little bit so that you can help yourself be more successful. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, a little bit about me. For those who don't know me, my name is Michael Ronn. I go by 3 taglines. The first is Dad, because I have a beautiful 9-year-old daughter. I also have a puppy, turtle, rabbit, and some other animals. And so that's an important priority for me. And I have a beautiful wife. Would be remiss not to mention her. And I'm also a YouTuber. So I have a YouTube channel called Author Level Up, which at the time of this video, or at the time of this recording, I'm sitting just south of 50,000 subscribers. So I do writing app tutorial videos. I've done some videos on Dabble. I've done lots of different videos on writing advice, writing craft, marketing, you name it. I've probably done it a little bit, but I'm mostly known for my writing app tutorial videos. And most relevant to all of you here as well is that I'm the author of over 90 books. My plan is to hit 100 books published this year, and I write science fiction, fantasy, and self-help books for writers. I've even written some poetry here and there. And so I'm a big fan of living the advice that I give. I don't want to be, and I'm not somebody that sits and talks about writing but doesn't actually do it. So the things that I talk about, I've actually lived. All right. And these are some of my links. If you're interested in engaging with me after our talk today, I've got a fiction website as well as a nonfiction website. And just just to give you a sample of the types of books that I publish, these are not all of my science fiction and fantasy novels, but it is a healthy smattering of them. I write mostly urban fantasy these days, but I've written all across the spectrum of science fiction and fantasy, as you can see on the screen. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about the keys to leveling up your author mindset. And the first one is an important lesson on understanding the three spheres of influence in your life. We're also going to talk about learning how to be yourself online and why that is so underrated. We're going to talk about how to harness the power of having fun. And there may or may not be some cute dog pictures in that section. And we're also going to talk about how to make friends with failure and opportunity and why that is a critical thing to understand if you want to level up your mindset. So, over the next 30, 45 minutes or so, that's what we're going to be talking about. And I certainly invite all of your questions. I may not be able to see your questions right away, but I promise I will get to them as soon as I can. Okay, so let's talk about understanding the three spheres of influence in your life. Okay, so everybody, almost everybody listening to this without question, falls into these categories. Okay, you've got a very multifaceted life, and I'm imagining that most of you who are watching this are people who write part time, meaning you have a full time job or a full time obligation, such as a stay at home parent, that occupies the majority of your time. And you find time to write in the space where you're not working that job or taking care of your kids. All right. And so I like to think about my own life personally as having three spheres of influence. Now, the first one up on screen here is the most obvious, and that's a personal life, right? So I mentioned that I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a grandson. I've got all sorts of personal obligations and responsibilities that I'm responsible for, and I take those very seriously. Now, there's also the writing life, which is the reason we're all here, because I also write books. I've got a YouTube gig. I do speaking, all of that. I travel. Anything that's related to writing, I'm usually involved with, and that is an important sphere of my life. Now, finally, and probably least importantly, but one that I don't want people to overlook, is you've also got your work life. All right. So we all have jobs. We all have other obligations that take us away for 40 hours a week, maybe more than that, maybe less than that. Your situation will vary. It depends on your personal circumstance. And we have these three spheres of influence in our lives. Now, often, what I have found is that they are like Venn diagrams. They're these three spheres of influence that are always rotating, and they come into contact with each other. And there are things that you can learn from your personal life that you can bring into your writing life, and things that you can learn from your writing life that you can bring into your work life, and vice versa. And you can kind of permutate this as much as you want. And I think that that's really important to understand, that these are three spheres of influence. And when you understand that, you can start to think about each of these spheres differently, which means that you can start to think about your entire life differently. So let me give you an example. So we talk often about work-life balance. I'm not a big fan of that term, work-life balance. I don't think that it's a very good term, because it implies that you've got two sides and you can balance them. Well, it's not really easy to balance everything that's going on in your life. I think that it's a juggling act that doesn't really work. I like the term work-life harmony a lot better, because with work-life harmony, it recognizes that you have many different facets of your life, and they're all playing together. They're all playing these different notes. And your job as the conductor of the beautiful song that is your life is to get all of these notes to play together in a harmonious song. All right. So, my question to you is, what could you do to harmonize your work life, your personal life, and your writing life together? And what would it look like if they were all playing a harmonious song? And what would it look like if they were not playing a harmonious song? Or better, I should say, since I'm a writer, I should be precise. What would it sound like if they were playing a beautiful song? What would it sound like if they don't? And what I've always been able to do is I've always been able to look for the dissonance in my life. So where are the notes that don't quite sound right? And I've been able to say, okay, well, what can I do to make that note sound better? And the reason I say all of this is because I am a textbook example of somebody who should not have a writing career. I should not be in front of all of you right now speaking. I should not have nearly 100 books to my name. I should not have a YouTube channel. I should not have anything. I should be just one of those people that just sits and stares out a window and thinks that they should be writing. So I have managed to build a writing career while working full time in the insurance industry with a demanding full time job, um, raising a family, attending law school classes in the evenings. I've done all of that. And I would be somebody that I don't think anybody would think twice about if I said, yeah, I'm just not going to write. I'm just going to focus on work. Right. I'm a statistical impossibility in a way because I've managed to do so much. And one of the reasons I've managed to do that is because I've focused on this harmony. Okay. And I've focused on finding different ways to harmonize things. So let me give you an example. So in my work life, I work with Microsoft Excel a lot. And we all know Microsoft Excel and writers don't mix. They're kind of like oil and water. But I had no choice. I got dragged kicking and screaming into one of my jobs, and I had to learn Excel or get fired. And so I learned Excel, and I got really good at it. And so I've been able to take that skill and bring it over into the writing life. Right? Perfect. It was great. So now when I'm looking at my sales reports, I'm not afraid. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. When I'm looking at data as a writer, I know how to analyze data. I'm not afraid of a big data set. All right. That's an area where my work life has benefited my writing life. Now, on the other side of that, I do lots of speaking as a writer. I've traveled all over the world. I give lots of talks like this where I hang out with you guys and I hang out with Hank. I've done podcast interviews, you name it. I am comfortable behind a microphone and I am comfortable in front of a camera. Well, when I have to speak at work and I have to give presentations frequently, I just use that experience and I parlay it into work, and that helps me at work, makes my boss happy, makes the people that I'm speaking to happy. All's good. Right. And so I don't try to compartmentalize my work. That's really important. I think there are a lot of people that work crappy jobs and they say work is the last thing I want to think about when I'm writing. I just want to focus on writing. But I challenge all of you that there are skills that you have developed in your day-to-day jobs that you could bring into your writing world. There's skills that you've learned in your personal life that you could bring into your writing world. So think about how to harmonize those areas of your life into a harmonious song. And I think you'd be surprised at what happens when you get all those notes to play together nicely. Okay, so some more tips on Spears. I just happen to be the kind of person that is extremely organized. I That's just how I operate. I love being organized, and that helps me keep things as harmonious as possible. Now, not everybody here is going to be an organization kind of person, but for those who know, and keeping things like your calendar and your email inbox and your schedule of your production schedule of what you should be working on every day, if that's your thing, that's really, really helpful. Really, really helpful. And one of the things again, I'll say it again, is learn how to carry lessons that you learn in one sphere into another. So if there's something profound that you learn in your personal life, how do you take that into your writing? Okay. If there's something interesting that you learn at work, that might only be applicable at work, how might your personal life and your writing life benefit from that? And if you adopt that little mindset, and it doesn't have to be a whole lot of things that you carry between the different spheres, but just a few things, it makes such a huge difference. Such a huge difference. And I've always been operating from that mindset. So when I went to law school, I carried a lot of those lessons into the writing life in terms of how I show up and how I run my business. I'm working, I'm always thinking about things that I can bring back from that world into my writing space. And I'm always thinking about how I can be more creative when I'm working as well. And so I challenge all of you to do that as well. Okay, so that's the first lesson. Our second lesson on how to level up our mindset is learning how to be yourself online. Now you're probably thinking, what do you mean by that, Michael? What do you mean by learning how to be yourself online? Okay. Well, first, we got to have a little talk about something called authenticity. And this word, I think, gets a bad rap these days. But really, I'm going to define it for you in a way that makes sense to me, that I hope makes sense to you. It probably doesn't line up with other definitions of authenticity that you've heard. Okay. How I define authenticity, at least in terms of being a writer in today's digital world, is it's when your online self matches your in-person self and all of your personality traits shine through to your audience. So I'm going to say that again. Authenticity is when your online self matches your in-person self and all of your personality traits shine through to your audience. If we were to speak English and speak a little bit more um, less formally, we would say it's learning how to be yourself on the internet. That's how I define authenticity. And for me, it is a cornerstone of building an author career in today's environment where we have to live on social media. We have to live through mediums like StreamYard and through social media networks and videos and audio and the written word through blogs. We have to constantly put ourselves out there and we have to interact with people. And whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, you are constantly interacting with people, even when you sleep. And why do you say that, Michael? Well, because you're putting your book out there. You're putting your author bio out there. You're putting anything you've ever done is out there working for you like a little carpenter ant. It's out there interacting with people. And if people choose to engage with you, they will engage with you. And a lot of times this happens while you're sleeping or while you're doing something that's not writing, right? And so your branding is something that is always happening, whether you want it to happen or not. So it's important to understand that branding is everything you do and it's everything you don't do. Okay. Now, how can you not be authentic? How can you not align your online self with your in-person self? Well, the first way to do that is to do things because you think you have to. So, classic example of this is if you decide to write hockey romance novels because hockey romance novels are hot and those are the things that are selling and that's the thing that you think can make you a living in your author career, and you decide to write hockey romance and you don't give a care in the world about hockey romance, you never read a hockey romance, it's not your thing, it's not your cup of tea. Well, you might be really successful writing hockey romance, but you're not going to enjoy it, right? You're doing something because you think you have to. And at some point, people start to sense that and they start to see through it. And who you are online is not lining up with who you actually are. That's a mistake. Okay. Now, also doing things that you don't enjoy doing. So, hockey romance, if you don't enjoy reading hockey romance, and I got nothing against hockey romance, it's just the first thing that popped into my head. But if you don't enjoy reading hockey romance, then why would you write hockey romance? Okay. And yeah, that's really it. That's how to not be authentic. Okay. Do things you have to do and do things that you don't enjoy doing. Now, if you want to actually be authentic, meaning you want to align your online self with your in-person self, I'm just going to go through these really quickly. Do things that you love. So if you love hockey romance, write hockey romance. If you love epic fantasy, write epic fantasy. If you love space opera, write space opera. If you love cozies, write cozies. I don't care what you write. Doesn't matter to me, but write the things that you love. Okay. And when you write the things that you love, have fun doing those things. So have a blast. Be the person that's falling out of their chair laughing when you're writing your novels, or be the person that's on the edge of your seat trying to figure out what's going to happen next. Because if you can do those things, then readers are going to mirror that behavior as well. And here's another thing that you should do. Talk about those things that you love doing publicly. If you love hockey romance, talk about hockey romance. Maybe you have a blog where you talk about hockey romance in some degree. Maybe you start a podcast on hockey romance. Maybe you do a bunch of Instagram posts on it. Whatever that looks like for you. I'm not saying you have to do what I do, but just talk about the things that you love doing publicly, because that makes you an expert. That starts to get people to gravitate towards you. And then, this is really important. Should you choose to do this, present yourself with good audio and video. Okay. Now, I hope I've made a positive first impression on you if you've never met me before. I hope that my camera looks nice. I hope that my audio sounds on point. I hope all of that is true, because it wasn't true for me a long time ago. So this is the 10th year I've been doing this. And if you look back to my really, really early interviews, I had a really bad camera. I had really, really bad audio. I had like one of those little cheap headsets, and if I did this speaking engagement with that equipment, you automatically would just, you'd be like, oh, who is this guy? Now, I did the best with what I had, and that's a whole nother topic. If that's all you got, then use what you got. But once you start to become more intentional, you start to do this for a little bit longer, and you start to make some royalties, and you can start to reinvest it back into the business. Focus on presenting yourself with good audio and video, because that makes a positive first impression. And when you make a positive first impression, that makes it so much easier for people to receive your message. Okay. Now, also learn copywriting so that your voice shines through. Copywriting is a whole nother workshop that we could talk about for several hours. Okay. But learning copywriting is really important, because that's the way in which you speak to your readers. A lot of authors don't learn copywriting, and when they write their newsletters or they write their social media posts, even though they're writing something that is heartfelt, it doesn't come across as heartfelt. And the main reason for that is because they're not using the right words, they're not using the right techniques to catch people's attention in a world where attention spans are less than that of a goldfish. So you've got to learn how to meet people where they are. When you start to write, share your successes and your struggles. If you want, talk about them publicly. If you don't want to talk about them publicly, talk about them with your friends or your close circle. There are people out there that want to root for you, and they can't root for you if they don't know what you're doing. So you got to update people with what you're doing, because if you don't, then you're missing out on opportunities for people to join you and come along with you in your community. And these three at the bottom are really important. Listen to what resonates with your audience. So if you start talking about hockey romance and nobody's paying attention, but all of a sudden you start doing a certain type of post about hockey romance, and then people really start engaging with that, what is it about that post that made people engage? Is it the image? Is it how you presented it? You're going to throw spaghetti at the wall, and a lot of things are not going to stick. But when something sticks, pay attention to why it sticks, and then start to do more of that. So do more of what resonates. And when you do that, do the things that resonate with you that you love. And then we begin at the very beginning of this slide, which is do things you love, have fun doing those things, so on and so forth. To me, that is authenticity defined, because you're doing it the Frank Sinatra way. You're doing it your way, right? You're writing the stories that you love, that light you up, that are connecting with readers. You're talking about those things publicly, and that's how you build a community. And when you do that, you start to find that your personality starts to shine through, and people really see you for who you are, not the internet persona that you want to be. So, I've been doing this for a while. When you meet me in person at a writing conference, I'm exactly as you think I'm going to be. All right. If you've watched enough of my YouTube videos, you've heard enough of my podcasts, what you see is what you get. That's ultimately what you want, because people want to feel like they know the writer, right? And when they feel like they know you, they're more likely to buy things from you. And we all know that people buy books and products on the internet from people that they know, like, and trust, right? So what better way to get people to feel like they know and trust you than to follow the things on this slide? Okay, so some more tips on authenticity. I'm a big fan of finding the medium that fits your personality. So I'm not recommending that you do all the things on this slide, and maybe you don't do any of the things on this slide, but you got to find something that resonates with you. Okay, and so for some of you, it might be blogging. Some of you, it might be starting a podcast talking about things that you're passionate about. Others, it might be a YouTube channel for those who are really, really courageous. Others, it might be a social media network, or it could be public speaking, right? It's going to look different for all of you. Each of you has a different journey that you're on. And something is going to resonate with you more than others. Okay. And once you figure out what that is, double down on that medium to amplify your personality. So, as I mentioned, I'm very comfortable behind a microphone and in front of a camera. Those are the ways that I can connect with people. I'm less likely to connect with people in a written blog post. Not that I don't like blog posts. I mean, I write books for Pete's sake. So why can't I write a blog post, right? I'm sure I write pretty good blog posts, but those don't resonate with people the way that being able to be on camera and make eye contact with you makes it for me. So I've doubled down on the things that work for me. There is something out there that works for you. You've just got to experiment and you've just got to find it. And when you find it, then that makes it way easier for people to really see the real you, which is what you want. All right. So now we got to get to the power of having fun. So the best advice that was ever given to me was by Dean Wesley Smith, and he always talks about having fun with your writing. And it's the best advice I've ever received because it's the lubricant that keeps the gears running, and it will keep the gears running in your writing life well into the future for as long as you want to have a career. Okay. So I promised there would be a cute dog picture. So when your soul smiles, it's infectious. When you're having fun, readers can feel it. And the way I like to describe this is, would you want to buy a book from a writer who hates their books? I mean, just think about it. Just think about this for a second. Imagine you're at a coffee shop and you start striking up a conversation with somebody and they tell you that they're a writer, right? And you say, "Oh, what's your book about?" And then the first thing they say is, "Oh, this book is crappy. You don't want to read it. I really didn't enjoy writing it, and it's about zombies, and I don't like zombies, but I thought I had to do it." And they just spend a bunch of time dumping on their book. Would you want to read that author's book? It's a rhetorical question. I can't see everybody here, but just everybody say no. You would not want to read that author's book, right? That would probably be the last book that you would want to read. Okay. Now, if I'm at a coffee shop and I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're gushing about their book and they're saying, "Yeah, it's about zombies and it's inspired by, XYZ and, World War Z and, XYZ is not a book. I just couldn't think of. I was trying to think of World War Z. It's inspired by World War Z and all the zombie novels I read when I was a kid. And if I happen to like zombie novels, I'm going to be interested in that, right? And I can feel that author's enthusiasm. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be the person that just dumps on your book. And at the same time, you don't want to be the author that just feels like they're slogging through the book and every chapter sucks. And I hate this chapter. Then you're at the next chapter. I hate this chapter. Then you finish the book. I hate this book. Psychologically, if you hate it, then readers are going to pick up on that too. Readers want to have fun when they're reading. They don't want that emotional, that heaviness that so many authors put on their books. So if you can have fun when you're writing your novels, then your readers are going to have fun when they're reading your novels. And when your readers have fun, they're going to be more likely to buy another novel from you. Why? Because, well, duh, you made them have fun, right? That's what you want to associate yourself with. That's what you want readers to associate you with. Okay. It doesn't matter what you're writing. You could be writing, super serious, hard science fiction. That's okay. That's still somebody's definition of a good time, right? So I just want you to think about that. You wouldn't buy a book from an author that hated writing their book, probably. So why would you want to hate the books that you write? So here's what happens when the writing is not fun. First things first, you burn out. Now, we use the term burnout a little too loosely. in the writing community. This is a criticism that I have. We say, "Oh, I'm burned out. I'm not going to do this or that," which really is just a euphemism of us saying, I'm burned out for a couple of days. I just need to take a couple of days break and then I'll come back. Worst case scenario, you take a couple of months off. But I hope that's just how it goes. Okay, but we use the term burnout for that. That's really not burnout. Burnout is when you cannot bring yourself to the writing computer. It is an existential crisis. It's when you cannot will yourself to write another word. And honestly, you question whether you should be writing in the first place. And burnout is an extremely serious thing. And it's not something I wish on any of you. Okay. And that's burnout. You don't want burnout. You should take burnout out of your vocabulary. It's not something you want. Okay. And you don't want to do that because when you burn out, your mental and physical health suffers. Okay. I've known authors who have written books that took off. And unfortunately, one author in particular, this person wrote in a genre that they didn't care about that much, but they were really good writers, and you know, they just happened to hit gold. And unfortunately, they had the golden handcuffs on. And so they started making a six-figure income. Everybody wanted to talk to them. They were on all the podcasts. They were, living the six-figure author life. And they woke up one morning and decided, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to write in this genre over here, which had nothing to do with the genre of readers that they had built, in their career. And they announced it to their audience, and the audience didn't care, And so this author had to start all over again. You don't want that. You don't want that kind of burnout and the sort of mental health and physical problems that it invites into your life. It's just way easier to have fun with the things that you're writing, even if it's harder. Okay. And as I said before, readers can sense when you're not having fun. Some more tips on fun. We should be like Mr. Gingerbread Man here. Okay, he's having a great time. So do challenges to keep yourself engaged. So right now, one of the things that I'm doing is I do it once a year. I call it my beast mode challenge. And during 1 month, I try to write as many words as humanly possible. So think about it like NaNoWriMo on steroids. Okay. And I've actually invited my community to do this with me. And it's fun. We all set aside time for writing. We focus on what we need to focus on, and we get things done. All right. So little writing challenges can be really helpful. And it doesn't even need to be that elaborate. It could be for a week. For every day this week, I am going to work on my outline. Or every day this week, I'm going to learn how to write on my phone. Okay. Just little things, just ways to challenge yourself and keep yourself chasing after a carrot, so to speak. Okay. And stop doing things you don't like within reason. I hate to tell everybody this, but we still have to do our taxes as writers. If anybody can figure out a way to not do your taxes and not end up the Wesley Snipes method, just please let me know. I want to know. But there's some things that we have to do, unfortunately. But there are a lot of things that we probably make ourselves do that maybe we don't have to do. Okay. And really keep your main thing the main thing. Focus on the essential items. And remember that writing comes first. Okay. And I also am a big believer in doing things in service of others. It's one of the reasons why I like to speak. I'm part of the Alliance of Independent Authors, Ally. I'm their outreach manager. They're a nonprofit organization for indie authors by indie authors. And I just like to give back because giving back to others just makes me feel good, and when I feel good, then the words I write are good too. And it's like this really great infinite loop. All right. So think about doing things in service for others, particularly other authors in the community and readers, doing things for your readers and your community as well. It makes things more fun. Trust me. And I also am a big believer in staying connected with your why. I have another talk that I give where I talk about why it's important to understand your why. I'm not going to go into the main particulars of that talk here, but understanding your why and why you're doing this will make it a lot easier on those days where you're not quite sure why you're doing this, right? We all have those days where we're sitting in front of the blinking cursor, especially earlier in our career, especially when we're working on our first book, where we're thinking, what am I doing? Is this even going to work out? Why am I writing this novel? What if no one reads it? What if people read it and hate it? All those things that go through your head. especially when you're early on in your career. Unfortunately, I hate to tell you that those things don't stop, but they just evolve. And when you stay connected with your why and why you're doing this in the first place, makes it a lot easier to keep charging through on those tough days. So just remember, be like Mr. Gingerbread Man here. So, lastly, I want to talk about making friends with failure and opportunity, because as a mindset shift, there are going to be a lot of things that happen in your author career, and you may think of them as failures, and they're actually opportunities. And there are going to be things that happen in your writing life where you think about them as opportunities, but they could actually be failures. They could actually be things that set you back or put you on the wrong path. And so I want to talk about that and why that is a critical part of understanding your writing life. So first, let's talk about fear. So I've got a picture of a great white shark on the screen here. And the reason I like to put a great white shark on here is because it's a great indicator or a great story about fear. It reminds me of a story that was told by Gavin de Becker. And if you don't know who Gavin de Becker is, he was the security consultant for Oprah Winfrey. He ran the security detail for Jeff Bezos for a while. And at the time of this recording, he runs the security detail for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., for his presidential campaign. So he's built his career protecting very wealthy and very important people. And he wrote a book called The Gift of Fear. And he did a series of talks about that book. And there's one talk I'll never forget where he tells a story about a guy that's swimming, I think, off the coast of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And he's catching a wave. And next thing you know is there's this giant great white shark that comes out of the depths, and he's like up to his torso in a great white shark's jaws. I mean, just imagine that for a second. And the shark has got him in his jaws. He's freaking out. He's thrashing all over the place. And all of a sudden, like his primitive mind takes over, and he gets this idea to reach around and grab the shark and jam his thumbs into the shark's eyes. And he said that they cracked like eggs. All right. So then the shark starts really going crazy, and it starts swimming down toward the ocean floor. And at this point, the shark has kind of let the guy go, so he could let go and swim away. But something tells the guy, hang on. So he holds on to this shark, even though it's swimming all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, which is like, why would you do that? And the shark gets to the bottom, and then something tells the guy to let go, and he swims up through his own blood and lives to tell about it. Now, why did something tell him to hold on to that shark? I don't know. Maybe it could have been that if he had let go of the shark when he was closer to the surface, the shark might have, hit him with a fin or something, or knocked him out, or maybe the shark would have tried to reattack him. Who knows? But there was something about that encounter where his body told him to hang on till the shark gets down to the bottom of the ocean, and then you will be safe to swim away. Okay. That is fear. Fear is a biological response that exists to save your life. It's what our ancestors have evolved for all sorts of reasons over the years to help keep us safe. That's fear. When you're in imminent bodily danger or you've experienced bodily danger, fear kicks in to help save your life. Okay. Now, when you are sitting in front of your writing computer and you're staring at the blinking cursor, probably your heart rate's going up a little bit. You're starting to get a little nervous. You might get the shakes. You might start to have some things that feel a lot like fear. It might feel like you're in the presence of a great white shark that's looming out of the depths to try to eat you, but it's not fear. It's actually anxiety. Okay. And anxiety is a response to something that you imagine or that you remember. Okay. So if you're imagining people not liking your book, or maybe you've written a book and there's something about that book that people didn't like, and there's something that's on the blinking cursor, just above the blinking cursor, that is similar to what you wrote that people didn't like, that's something that you remember. That's anxiety. Anxiety is a response to something that that you are imagining or that you're remembering. Fear is a biological response that is designed to save your life. And when you understand that, then the secret is to stop being afraid of things that you imagine or that you remember, because it has no power over you. So I'm willing to bet, I would bet at least part of my house in Vegas that the next time you're staring at a blinking cursor, a saber-toothed tiger is not going to jump through your window and eat you. Just you all tell me if that's a safe bet. I think it's a pretty safe bet. Okay, so it's what you're experiencing in front of that blinking cursor is not fear; it's anxiety, because it's often something that you're imagining or that you're remembering. So when you're writing and you start to devolve into that mindset, we all know that mindset, that inner critic. When that inner critic starts talking, it starts showing those pictures in front of your mind's eye, and starts playing those same movies that it's been playing in your head for a long time. I want you to snap out of it and say, is this something that I'm imagining or that I'm remembering? And if the answer is yes, which the answer will be yes more times than no, then keep going. Keep going. I give you permission to keep going. And you know what? If that saber-toothed tiger shows up and cuts you into 3 easy pieces before it gobbles you, then you have my permission to say, Michael, you are full of crap. All right. You are full of crap. You're full of beans. Go away. Go sit down somewhere. But until that saber-toothed tiger shows up in your writing office, I think you're going to be okay. Okay. So that's the first mindset we have to talk about. Okay. Now let's talk about failure, because we often are afraid of failure, aren't we? We are often afraid of failure. And when we're sitting in front of that writing cursor, we're thinking about failure, aren't we? We think about our book not doing successful. We think about readers not liking it. We think about whether we're adequate enough to write this story. What we're really focused on is we're focused on our own failure. And it's our biology working against us in a way, because there's no imminent threat of physical danger. It's our mind playing tricks on us, and we think that when we experience failure, that there's a game over. That if I publish this book, that's it. If it doesn't sell, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people tell me that if this book doesn't work out, then I'm gonna have to hang up my hat and my writing career is over. I got to tell you that game overs don't exist for writers. This we're not like mom and pop shops, like your local florist, where they can't meet their overhead or they can't meet their payroll and then they got to shut down. A writer is somebody who always writes. I don't care what happens to you in your life, as long as you have the mental capacity to pick up a pen or sit down at a keyboard and you've got the mental capacity to put words together, you can write. It doesn't cost you anything to write. Okay. Most of the writing apps out there, are not that terribly expensive. And, if worse things push came to shove, you could still write on Notepad, or you could write on Apple Notes, or you could write in Microsoft OneNote, the free things that come on your computer. Okay. There is nothing that can stop you from writing. So we developed this game over mentality that if this book doesn't work, I'm done. Or if readers don't buy this, that's the end of my career. And the ironic thing is, I've talked to a lot of successful long-term authors who have had many times in their lives where they said, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to be able to write another word, and then they keep going. And then next thing you know, they write something that's incredibly successful. Okay. So as long as you can pick up the pen or sit in front of a computer, there's no such thing as a game over. Okay. Now, failure and opportunity are identical twins. So when you have a failure in your life, in your writing life in particular, we often tend to internalize that failure. We think, I blew it and I missed my opportunity, and that's it. One of the things that I used to say a lot when I first started my career, I started writing professionally in 2012. Well, at least started writing with the aspiration of being professional in 2012. And I published my first book in 2014. And when I published that first book, I had just missed the Kindle Gold Rush. Now, for those of you who don't remember the Kindle Gold Rush, that was the time when the Amazon Kindle had just come out. I think the Kindle came out in 2007, 2008, something like that. But the self-publishing platform didn't technically start until like 2010. And once it did, people started putting stuff up on Kindle and it would sell like gangbusters. And I saw that and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm going to publish my first book. I'm going to be a millionaire. These are literal words that were going through my head. And I published my first book in 2014, and lo and behold, the Kindle gold rush really wasn't a thing anymore. It kind of ended sometime in 2013, and I thought I just missed the boat. Right? I thought I just completely missed the boat, and that was it. Okay, and I thought that was a failure because I should have moved faster. I should have published that first book faster, and couldn't have been further from the truth. The reality is that publishing at the time I published was a great opportunity because there were tools that existed in 2014 that didn't exist in 2012. And so I was able to format my book a lot easier. I was able to find an editor a lot more easily. I was able to do a lot of things a lot more easily that other authors who published in 2012 couldn't do. And so there's no such thing as being late. There's no such thing as being a failure. Okay. It's just failure and opportunity are identical twins. Something that looks like a failure is actually not always a failure. Okay. So it's what they say. Failure is more common than success, but failure is a better teacher. So how do you learn from a failure? Let's say you do have a failure. Okay. Something that you think is a failure. I want you to ask yourself a few questions. Okay. And I'm going to teach you how to turn failure into wisdom. So first, I want you to ask, what can I be grateful for? I don't care how bad it is. Okay. Pick yourself off the ground for just a second and just ask yourself, what can I be grateful for? Is there something that I can be grateful for in this experience? Chances are there's something you can be grateful for, even if it's small. The next thing I want you to ask is, what did I learn from this? And again, keep yourself up off the ground and ask yourself what you learned. Okay. And then I want you to ask, what can I do better next time? Because there's probably something that you could do better next time. There's probably a movie playing in your head about what you could have done, what you should have done, what you would have done if you had only known, all the things that we play in our head. Okay. And I also want you to ask, what couldn't I have anticipated? What is the one thing that just happened that I didn't expect? Because I want you to be kind to yourself. So sure, there are things you could have done, things you would have done if you had known more, right? But there are things that probably came out of left field too that you couldn't have anticipated. And I think you should acknowledge those things because you should be kind to yourself. And finally, I want you to ask, once you've gone through all of those things, is this really a failure? Because how can something be a failure if it gave you something to be grateful for? If it gave you some gratitude? How can something be a failure if you learned from it? How can something be a failure if you learned what to do next time and what not to do? And how can something be a failure if you know what the potential blind spots are next time around? That's why I think that a lot of things that we classify as failures are not actually failures. They're actually opportunities. Because if you've learned something that you can be grateful for, you've learned something, you've learned what to do next time and what not to do, you've learned the things that you couldn't anticipate. Well, the next time you step up to the bat, you're probably going to do a lot better, right? So, in that light, is this really a failure? And there are very few things that I can say personally. I don't know if I've even ever had a real failure. Very few things that I could say are actual failures in my writing career. Sure, I've done things where I've lost money. Sure, I've published books that, flopped like fish, right? I've done all sorts of things, that you could say, Michael missed the mark on that. Yep, Michael stepped up to the bat and just completely swung and missed. Okay. And I bet we could say that about any author on this call. We could say it about any author that is successful. And it's not a matter of whether you fail, it's a matter of what you do with it. And that has been one of the secrets to my success. So when we think about the keys to leveling up your author mindset, we talked about understanding the three spheres of influence in your life: your personal life, your work life, and your writing life, and how to take lessons that you learn from one and carry it into the other. We've learned about how to be yourself on the internet and how aligning who you are online with who you are in person is critically important and not something that's really easy to do, especially in the beginning. It's a process of exploration and finding what works for you. We talked about how to harness the power of having fun, because when you're having fun, everything is a lot easier. And finally, we talked about how to make friends with failure and opportunity, and that failure is really often just an opportunity in disguise. Okay. So those are the keys to leveling up your author mindset. Now, I have some more advice for you if you're interested. If you like the things that I had to say today, I did write a book. It's called Mental Models for Writers: 73 Ways to Elevate Your Thinking, Improve Your Writing, and Capture Success. And it's really focused on a lot of mental models that successful people have used to be successful in their own lives, different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching problems that you might have in every stage of the writing process, from creativity all the way down to business and marketing, just different ways to think about the writing life. And I know it will help you. And it's available at all retailers. It's available in ebook and paperback. And I've got a QR code on the screen. You can scan that if you dare, or you can just get it at authorlevelup.com/mental models. And with that, I will leave that QR code and link on the screen, and I invite your questions.
Michael, that was incredible. Thank you so very much. Like Michael said, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. We've got a few minutes here at the end. If there's anything that you would like to ask Michael, please post that in there. We got a couple of comments. The comments were rather quiet, which tells me that people were hanging with rapt attention at what you were saying. But Leia said it's not fear, it's anxiety. I love that. Thank you. And that portion of your talk really resonated with people. Jen said, love that too. That anxiety keeps me prioritizing other things over the writing, maybe recognizing it is the start to getting back to the writing. It's all about taking
Absolutely.
that negative energy and figuring out how to spin that to get the wheels turning again. Did one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking, Michael, is when you were talking about this sense of failure and realizing at this vantage point from writing for more than 10 years, writing and publishing for more than 10 years that you have. Did you ever have those times where you thought, oh no, this book series didn't do what I wanted it to, or maybe this system of writing that I'm trying out, it really didn't do what I wanted to, and now I've wasted 3 months of my time, and I'll never get that back. And when you were talking about the Kindle Gold Rush, especially because that's at the tail end of that is when I started writing and publishing as well. And I remember hearing all of these stories from people that, threw a book together, made a cover in Microsoft Word, threw it up there, and they're instantly millionaires. We all heard those stories, and we were rushing to get our books out as well. And, we missed that wave. But, did you ever feel like, especially in those times where everything seems like if you don't hit it while the iron's hot, you're going to miss this opportunity? Well, now a decade later, you realize those opportunities kind of come in waves, and patience is more important a lot of times than almost anything else that you can pick up in your writing career. Did you have times like that where you felt, oh no, I've missed this opportunity, and then with time and patience, you start realizing that it's going to be okay?
Oh, sure, sure, all the time, especially early on in my career. I've learned, one of the things I forced myself to do recently is I sat down and actually made myself remember a lesson that I learned from every book that I wrote. Right,
I
and
love it.
so with a lot of my early books, a lot of the lessons I learned were technical. So my very first book was a choose your own adventure-esque book for adults, and
Yeah.
it was like a fantasy novel. And I did some crazy stuff in there. It's like, you typically with your choose your own adventure books, like you have, you know, you get some choices, and you can pick one, and you go to this page. You pick another one, you go to another
Sure.
page. I took that to a whole different level. Like I included a game show in my very first one. Like, and it was a game show that the reader could play, and the contestants would make different decisions based on what you decided.
Oh,
And so
that's
I just took it to a
hilarious.
whole nother level. And boy, did that give me a master class on how to format an ebook, and doing all sorts of the technical stuff, how to put images in, how did I put images of the prizes in? Like, I learned so much through
Yeah.
that. And that first book, I only made $5.79 my first month of publishing. And it's because I sold 3 books. I sold one to my
Yeah.
mom, one to my friend, and then another one because back in those days you had to buy a copy of your book to generate a sales rank,
Right.
on Amazon, and
Right.
$5.79, okay. But boy, I learned a lot about formatting,
Right.
and so I forced myself to do that kind of exercise with all of my first books. And I found that I've come a long way.
Yeah.
I learned a
Well,
lot.
the funny thing about that is, with the state of the internet and devices now, a book that can do all of the things that you envisioned 10 years ago, it's probably not that far off, on the horizon that you could
Yeah.
actually, make a lot of those things work. We got a comment from Kimmy. Let me pop it up on the screen. This was super helpful. Thank you. Thoughts on balancing reader expectations versus your own vision for a story? And I really want to hear your thoughts on this, Michael, because um, especially I hear this from people that are just starting to use writers groups or I'm drawing a blank here, like, people that get beta
Critiques.
readers and a feedback
Mhm.
group, and how do they then begin to process the comments that they are getting back, and how do you weigh what your beta readers say versus what your vision is? So anyway, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to take it in a slightly different direction,
Okay,
and then
great.
I'll come back to what
Yeah,
you suggested. So most important thing you can do as a writer who's writing in a genre is to read in your genre. So read as many books as you can in your genre, and you start to absorb what reader expectations are, but pay attention to the big authors, whoever the big authors are in your subgenre. So for example, I'm not saying read fantasy. I'm
sure.
saying read epic fantasy, right? So you got to dial down as far as you can into your genre based on what your book is, and pick the top books in your genre, the ones that readers are talking about, and go through the reviews. Read those books and figure out what it is that readers like about those books, right? And then you do those things, right? You do those things. Now, there may be some things that those big name authors do that you don't like. I think we can all point to our favorite authors and say, "No, I would not have done that in my
Sure.
plot, or I wouldn't have twisted it that way." That's where your artistry comes in, right? So you take the things that you don't agree with and you do them differently. But the key is to stay within the framework of your genre. So in order to do that, you got to understand what your genre is, right? So you can't write a romance and not put a happily ever after in it, right?
Right.
But I see people do that a lot. They'll try to write a romance, and then they'll try to end it on a sour note. Well, you'll get pilloried by your reader.
Y
So you got to
Yeah.
understand what your genre and your subgenre are. That's just to start, okay? And then to kind of go back to what you were saying, Hank, about beta readers and critique groups, I actually think you have to be really careful about that. I'm not against beta readers. I love beta readers. I think it's a good thing to do, but I think it's important to be selective about the types of beta readers that you pick. I'm not a fan of critique groups. Um, I've never met a critique group that has ever done me any good. I just
Mhm.
am not convinced that giving your story to a bunch of people just to rip apart can ever lead to any good. That's just a whole nother topic for another discussion.
Yeah.
But we'll take beta readers, for example. Be selective about your beta readers. Pick beta readers who read books in your subgenre. So you don't want just a beta reader that, you know, reads anything and everything under the sun, as many of them are wont to do. You want a beta reader that specializes in your genre. So if you write hockey romance, you want somebody that reads a lot of hockey romance because they're going to be able to give you better feedback, right? And
Right.
so they can help you take your vision and critique, hey, is your vision lining up with what readers would typically expect? Okay. And should you choose to edit your novel based on that feedback, then you can. But the really important thing is you're giving your book to somebody, right? And you're trusting them with your book, and you're going to trust their advice. So you really want to trust somebody who's got advice that you want. And so you wouldn't give your novel, you wouldn't give your science fiction novel to somebody that only reads romance. That doesn't make any sense, but that's what a lot of people do. So,
Right.
but at the end of the day, you also have to remember that you are the artist and you told that story for a reason. I happen to think that when I sit in front of the computer and words come to me, they come to me for a reason. And I have learned to
Yeah.
trust that. It's an intuition sort of thing. And so there's a time when you want to flex on your artistry, and you should be doing that most of the time. And yeah,
Yeah.
there are going to be some things that readers say, hey, maybe other readers wouldn't like that, or maybe you should do it this way. And you can consider those things as they come up, but just be careful about who you give your story to begin with.
Right. And that was sage advice about the genre and subgenre, because while
Mhm.
you may have someone that is a fan of fantasy and you give them the Dresden Files, and what they really are looking for is the Wheel of Time. Both
Right.
of those series are absolutely fantasy, way different subgenre, that you're dealing with
Totally
there.
different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
and
different.
totally different ways of handling conflict, addressing characterization. I mean, all the nuts and bolts things that we talk about in craft all the time are done completely
Exactly.
differently in both of those
Exactly.
books.
Exactly.
So,
Well, folks, thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic hour. Thank you, Michael LeBron. I posted in the comments while Michael was talking a link to Michael's YouTube channel, Author Level Up. Say that 3 times really fast. So go over, make sure you subscribe to Michael's to his YouTube channel. Lots and lots of great or content all the time. Michael, always fun hanging out with you. Thank you so much for bringing this great advice to our writing group.
thank you, Hank. It's been my pleasure, and thank you everyone for hanging out.
Thank you. And folks, at 11 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, we're having a writing sprint Wednesday. Robert, who normally runs those, is out of town on a family vacation. So Doug and I will be running the writing sprints like we did last week. So we're shifting the time around a little bit because Doug is also doing a workshop tomorrow on writing dang good dialogue. And that'll be at 2 p.m. Eastern. So same YouTube channel as you're watching this on. Come back tomorrow for more great content. Michael, thank you. Thank you all for joining us.